Welcome to Dear Book Coach. I'm Terri Thayer, certified book coach, certified focusing professional, and author.
I am Carrie Savage, certified book coach, writer, and project manager.
And I'm Stephanie Detlefs, writer and certified book coach.
This is a friendly advice space as you plan, draft, and revise your novel. In each video, we answer a question submitted by a writer like you from 3 points of view, and you get to choose the advice that works for you. Today's question comes from George. Do names really matter? What are the pitfalls in naming characters? Carrie?
This is going to be a fun one to answer because I know we all have some different things to say about it, which is awesome. And I'm also smiling because it's funny to me that I know that this matters so much to some people and not so much to others. And I definitely fall on the spectrum of like, it doesn't really matter all that much to me, at least in my own work I'm talking about. So I will talk a little bit about how I chose my names because I've, in the historical fiction vein, that is, there's a little something to that, I think. On the other hand, I have spent hours helping writer friends choose names for their novels, and I just find it so interesting that I will perfectly willing to spend 5 hours in a coffee shop debating whether Lucinda or Olive is the better name for this character, and it makes me smile. I do understand that names can have a lot more meaning beyond just a character and a series of letters that come together to form the name. Especially if you have characters outside of your own identity groups, you should use sensitivity in choosing those names. And I know Stephanie is going to say a little bit more about this, so I'm going to sort of leave it at that. From my perspective as a historical fiction writer, what I was just really mindful of is being careful to choose names from that particular time period. You can use census data, primary source materials, and mine those items for names from a particular time and place. Like, you don't want to have a very, very modern name in your novel that's set in the 1400s. That's just going to stand out to a reader right away, and they're just not, it's just going to sort of discombobulate them. So some interesting places, as I mentioned, like primary source materials are great to mine for that sort of thing, newspapers, magazines. I have a lot of fun in the Mount Auburn Cemetery, which is not too far from my house, actually. There are some fantastic names there that are highly unusual and that nobody is named anymore. For example, Zebediah, which I think is just super fun and in the right context would be very appropriate and memorable and a lot of fun to use. So maybe not in this book because it's a little more modern than my current book, but I have definitely filed that one away for future use. And I know lots of people keep spreadsheets or other documents or running lists, and I think that that's a fine thing to do, especially if this is something that that is really, really important to you and says a lot to you about your characters and who they are. So pretty simple from my perspective, but I know that's not always the case with everybody. So Stephanie, what do you think?
Well, it's pretty simple from my perspective too, because I don't think there's a right or wrong way to go about naming a character other than a couple of considerations. One being, like you were just saying, Carrie, having a name that wasn't used in that time period, that makes no sense. And then also the issue of cultural sensitivity, which all I wanted to say about that was just to be careful using names that are culturally different than your own cultural experience. Not to say you shouldn't, but if you're writing a cast of characters that is diverse, you might run the names past a sensitivity reader or just like you would with anything else that is outside of your own cultural experience. So but other than that, I don't think there is a wrong way to go about naming your characters. I think it depends on the writer, much like 90% of the stuff that we talk about here on Dear Book Coach. I personally love to play with names of my characters. First names tend to come pretty quickly to me. They just pop into my head, and I usually go with the first one because I think well, if it popped in my head, that must be the right name, you know. I like to go a little deeper when I come up with last names or family names. I think about the ancestral lineage of my character, which may or may not have anything to do with the story, and then I try to find names that fit, that are interesting and that I like the sound of. I also like to explore the meanings of names, you know, what they just the meanings of them. And I try to find names that mean something that fit the character in some way, even if it's just a very small way that only I know about, that again, may or may not ever play into the book. It's just a little way that I like to connect to my characters. I would say that it's pretty important, especially if you're writing for younger readers, which I do, that you have names that are pretty easily decoded. So even if the reader is pronouncing it wrong in their head, they need to not stumble over it every time. I guess I would say that's probably true for adults too. We don't want to come to a name and wonder every time how to pronounce it, you know? So it should be, the first name should be pretty quick to decode, and then so that they have a sound for that name in their head as they read. And then I guess the last thing I say is just beware, especially in the first draft, of going down a rabbit hole with picking names, because I think that it's a really easy way to procrastinate. If you're writing a first draft, don't let the names of people, especially side characters, hang you up. I do a lot of brackets with name TK in there, which is the editorial symbol for to come, which just means that I haven't decided yet. But that anywhere that name should be used, I just write name TK and then I keep going, knowing that I'll figure it out later. So there's, again, no wrong way to do it in my opinion, but a couple things to be aware of, and have fun with it, but don't let it derail your work. Terri, what do you think? You're muted.
Uh-oh.
Sorry, my dog had found a squeaky toy. I think there are wrong ways to do it, truthfully. I really do. I have a lot of problem when I'm reading a book and everybody's name starts with the same letter of the alphabet. Or I literally was reading a book just recently where the 3 cops were named Prickett, Pringle, and Peter or something. And I couldn't distinguish between the 2 of them, you know, or 3 of them. When our brain looks at a word, it doesn't read the whole word, it just makes a connection. So don't make it hard on your readers by having these names that all start with the same letters. And it's really difficult to not do that. We all have these proclivities, I think, for certain names. So I would literally make a chart, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way down, and put my characters' names in there and just make sure that the last names and the first names aren't all starting with the same letters. And just like Stephanie was saying, don't make it hard to decode. You can use this to your advantage, though. If you have a secondary character, you know, you have a couple, just name them Betsy and Bob. We know they go together, and that will make it easier. Use the same principle for yourself as opposed to against yourself. I like to make them memorable. I had to laugh, though, when I was starting my first quilting mystery, I called the protagonist's new boyfriend Buster, just because I couldn't think of another name. And I was like, I said to my critique group, this isn't staying. And they were like, no, we love it. We love it. And it took me a long time to come around to Buster. And, you know, he became a very popular character in my part of the world. And nobody would let me call him anything but Buster. So be careful your critique group doesn't fall in love with a dumb name like Buster. But, you know, having the name, like Stephanie said, suit the character. In my stamping series, I have a character named Rocky. You know, she is hard. She's craggy. She's not easy to get along with, but the protagonist's best friend's name is Dina. It's softer and more likable. I like reading the credits of TV shows because you get a lot of different surnames that you may not, my first surnames are always kind of the surface ones, but reading, especially British TV shows, which you can't always use, but you can get some unusual names that aren't so unusual that they stand out in a bad way, but unusual in that you can remember them or they set your character apart a little bit. Our names are really important to us, and the nicknames that people call you, or the the middle name that you have that you never use, the last name that you rejected because it had some history with your lineage, these are all things that tell us stuff about the characters. So I say choose your names really carefully. Don't spend too much time on it, but yeah, I do think it's worth some consideration.
I love that. The 3 Ps.
So annoying.
Driving you crazy, but then the idea of having a couple who like only ever appears together, so it doesn't matter, having them with the same first letter, because then they're easy to lump together. That's brilliant. I'd never thought of that.
Well, I actually was thinking, like, in the novel you're talking about, if they were like, if it was sort of a, satirical or humorous kind of novel, if the 3 of them are the investigators and they always travel in a pack and they all have that same P, like, then you could kind of make it work on the same principle that you were just talking about with Betsy and Bob. But in the context in which you framed it, I don't think that was the intention. So,
no.
Not for me.
Yes. And to be fair, as much as I kind of said, oh, I don't really care about names, I have one of those names that people spell wrong all the time, and I am used to it, but at the same time, I can get prickly about it. So that's fair enough. We do care about our names. They are important.
As you're talking, I have to say too, your character's name is not a character trait either. Don't think just because you name them Carrie and they always get annoyed that their name is spelled wrong, that's not a character trait. You know what I mean? Don't be lazy.
So follow Terry's advice. She's the most rigorous among us, probably.
At least when it comes to names.
Oh. Well, that is it for today. We hope you found an answer that made sense to you at this point in your life and at this point in your book. Remember that you can submit your question anytime at dearbookcoach.com and subscribe to our weekly email, because each month we randomly choose a subscriber who wins a call with the coach of their choice. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.